Hi everyone, we're joined today by Dan Jenkins-Jones, who's from the BTO, so the British Trust of Ornithology for East Glamorgan. The reason I've got Dan today is obviously working at the Lisvane and Llanishen site. Dan works there. He can tell you a little bit about the work that he's been doing there and bring to life some of the wildlife that you'd meet that you could potentially use for some of the characters within your resources. So hi Dan, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for your time today. So yeah, we'd be just really interested just to learn a little bit more about what you do at the site, how long you've been doing it, just to start us off.
Okay, then, well, Llanishen and Lisvane Reservoir is really kind of an important area for wildlife anyway, but the fact that it's right in the middle of a city centre makes it even kind of doubly more important, really, in terms of, and hopefully in the future, increased access for people to go there and enjoy the wildlife there. There are two reservoirs there. Llanishen is the largest one. Lisvane is the smallest one. Lisvane is actually designated as a SSSI, Site of Special Scientific Interest. In terms of the actual reservoir itself, that's for the tufted duck population there. These are kind of black and white smart birds that you may have seen with the tufts on their head, hence the name, which traditionally came to the smaller reservoir to molt at the end of the summer. So that's why it's a SSSI. But the banks around Lisvane Reservoir and Llanishen Reservoir are now SSSI as well for waxcap fungi as well. So these tiny little mushrooms, they're not much to look at, but and I don't know much about my mushrooms, but they're very, very important as well, and that's why they're designated. They've been there for many, many years. Obviously, I'm not quite sure of the history, how long they've been there, but they've been there for decades. And there have been bird counts on the site, going back to the 1960s, actually. But in more regularly, probably going back about 25 to 30 years. We've got quite a lot of data there. And the work that I do at the reservoirs is I take part in something called WEBS, the Wetland Bird Survey. So the Wetland Bird Survey is run by the British Trust for Ornithology, and it's a survey to monitor the non-breeding water birds in the UK. So basically, those birds that come to the UK or stay in the UK during the kind of autumn, winter, and early spring months. And it's an important survey because the UK is home to internationally important numbers of water birds. So it's important that we kind of count these sites. So Llanishen and Lisvane Reservoir, it's a site in Cardiff, Roath Park Lake, you may also be familiar with. There's another one that's counted, Cardiff Bay is counted, Rumney Estuary is counted. So we have quite a few, we have about 50 sites across East Glamorgan that are counted, and Llanishen and Lisvane's amongst the largest sites. And the reason we do this is so that we can monitor populations, obviously, crunch the data, crunch the counts, etc., and see which birds are doing well and which birds are not doing so well. There are stories from both ends of the spectrum. And what it entails is people like myself going to these sites once a month on what's called a core count date. That's set by BTOHQ because water birds, especially during the non-breeding period, are quite mobile. So we try and coordinate the counts so that we don't double count. So, for example, we don't count birds at Roath Park Lake on a different day because they may fly over to Llanishen and Lisvane Reservoir and vice versa.
Yeah.
I submit those counts online. I go to the reservoirs on these dates. It takes me about an hour and a half, 2 hours maximum to count the birds there. Obviously, it's more busy during the winter months because there are more water birds that come there during the winter months. They tend to leave then during the summer. And then I submit these counts online. I only do the counts. The proper scientists, if you like, are the ones that number crunch all these data that come in from across the whole of the UK. And then they work out what the populations of birds are doing.
You sort of, being an ex-primary teacher, whenever I've done this with children, they've always been fascinated to just the different regions that they come from. So, for example, birds that have come from Canada, and just we look back then maybe their story to why they would come, and there's so much learning opportunities you can get from that. And they're always really interested by that as well. And I'm just thinking while I'm hearing you talk about that, that could be for some of your groups, guys. You could look at the children doing a data collection, similar to Dan, that they could, whilst they're there, just start to notice the birds that they're seeing. I mean, what kind of birds would be around at this period? Obviously, we're just after Easter. What kind of birds are you seeing now?
So we're seeing, I talked a bit earlier about the tufted ducks, so they're really easy to count and to identify. They're diving ducks, so they occasionally dive into the water, which makes it a bit of a challenge to count them. You have to count them several times and kind of work out how many you've got there, which could be quite fun for the children as well. They're either sleeping or busy diving, so they're good fun to watch. There are a lot of kind of quite stunning birds called great crested grebes there at the moment. Again, really easily identifiable birds. Their feathers used to be used for the plumage industry, for hats, etc. back in the Victorian period. If it wasn't for great crested grebes, there wouldn't be the RSPB, because the RSPB were kind of created to try and protect these birds. They're there in about 20 or 30 of them there at the moment. Stunning birds. There are some birds that are quite boring looking. There's some birds that are exciting looking. So looking at it from a child's eyes, great crested grebes are really kind of attractive birds to look at. They also do kind of these funny little dances where their heads go back and forth like this, and it's quite fun to watch them do that. And because they're quite large, they're quite easy to count as well. You've got their smaller cousins, little grebes, that are there as well. These are kind of, again, really, really attractive birds for kids to enjoy and get into. They've got the fluffiest bottoms probably in the bird world. They spend a lot of time kind of diving for fish there as well, which is kind of tricky to count them, but part of the challenge. And then you've got much larger birds like kind of cormorants there that you can see fishing. Actually, I was there this week and I could see them actually kind of scoffing the fish down, which is always gets children excited when they see fish being eaten. It's a bit yuck. Kids love yuck, don't they, really? And they've got geese there as well, kind of Canada geese, which are, again, easy to count and quite beautiful birds. But as you were saying, Nick, at different times of year, you see different birds there that come from different parts of the world. So I know lately that they've got a bird there on there at the moment called a ring-necked duck. Not much to look at, but that bird should be in America at the moment. It should not be on Finishing Bisway Reservoir. It's been there for a few weeks now. We've had hooper swans there that come from they breed in northern Russia. One or two of those have popped in recently. We've had divers there. Again, kind of quite difficult to describe, but kind of like better looking cormorants, if you put it that way. The nearest that they breed would be Scotland. So you get birds travelling from a long way there, really, to spend winter. And because our winters here are, believe it or not, warmer than in Europe, so they
can't believe that.
If you wanted to do kind of counts of different birds, there's plenty of scope there.
Yeah, whenever I've done bird counts, bird watching, we've done it in Newport Wetlands. It's always been really interesting as well, just for them to stay still. They always complain that I can't see anything, usually because they're making such a racket. It's quite a nice mindfulness approach to learning, where they just sit still and they watch, and that can be a really nice and relaxing thing in terms of their health and well-being. But they actually need to do that to actually observe these birds, so that could be another aspect of it as well.
Very much so. I've seen children, I've kind of done some work, I used to work for the RSPB, and I've seen children kind of going to Newport Wetlands. One of my great friends used to be the lead field teacher there, and they would trudge in, they didn't want to be there, etc. And then when they left an hour or two later, they were as if they'd been on, you could see they were kind of smiling at Cheshire Cats, etc. They'd have a fantastic time. So you can see them either being excited by it, or as you say, Nick, kind of getting engrossed in it as well. It depends on the child very often how they react. And there's been a lot of talk, obviously, over the last 12, 13 months about the impact of nature on people's mental health and their well-being. It's one of the reasons I go out and do it. It keeps me sane. But there is scope there for children to be able to get that engaged. I'd say Lisvane Reservoir is the smallest reservoir. As you quite rightly say, you have to make sure that they can see the birds. Clinician's probably that a bit too big, but you can actually walk around it, so you can see the birds. But Lisvane, definitely, you can pretty much see the whole of the reservoir from one spot.
Okay. In terms of, obviously, your specialty's birds, but what other wildlife would you look likely to be encountering at the site?
Well, flowers definitely at certain times of the year. The banks there can be absolutely kind of covered in flowers. And then, of course, the big word, the buzzword, if you forgive the pun at the moment, is pollinators. So on the banks obviously kind of trap the heat as well. There's that kind of a microclimate going on there as well. So when you've got the flowers and you've got a nice day like today, it can be, literally buzzing with bees, etc. So I'm not much of a botanist, so I don't know the species, but I know it looks lovely and it's absolutely beautiful. I'm not sure really in terms of for the children, that I know that they're going to be doing some work down in the woodlands I'm trying to work out on the southerly side of the reservoir, just off site, because I think Bushwater own that area as well. So there's woodland areas for them to be able to engage in, and all the creatures. Obviously, you get kind of beetles and all sorts of creepy crawlies and bugs, etc. that they can do there. There's some longer grass on the outside of the banks, so there might be opportunity to do some kind of mini beast hunts or kind of bug sweeps. You can take your little nets and drag those through the grass and see what you get. And then the other thing that I've seen in I would say abundance nowadays, but in good numbers, are butterflies as well. And again, you can catch those with nets if you do it carefully and examine them like we all used to do when we were kids.
Yeah, I mean, these are brilliant ideas. Obviously, you've got the fish that all these birds are eating. Annie mentioned the adders as well. A few snakes there.
Yeah, there's but probably difficult to find. The one so this is it's early days, I'd say, at Clinician Lisvane at the moment in terms of what they might be able to do to attract more wildlife, but certainly make it more visible to the public. But if they were to put, you can have these kind of reptile mats, which can either be kind of some sort of rubber, or you can have them metal, etc. Obviously, it's quite well known that they go under their slow worms and adders, etc., to warm up, and because the mat kind of warms them up faster than if they were exposed, and that could definitely be an opportunity. I'm sure Annie will be up for that if the opportunity arose. Yeah,
we were just chatting just before I started to record about I Cardiff boy. I didn't know this. Just that green corridor that runs through Cardiff, so that could be a potential something that we look at. Would you mind just sharing a bit more about that, the wildlife corridor that runs through Cardiff?
So you're right, Nick. It's an important corridor because the wonderful thing about Cardiff is quite a green city. I think it's one of the greenest cities in the UK, and there is a green corridor between Roath Park Lake right out to the outskirts of Cardiff, and that travels from Roath Park Lake up Nant Fawr, which is a stream called Nant Fawr, which kind of is a stream that actually flows out of Clinician Lisvane Reservoir. Then you go to the reservoir to the south, and then through Clinician and Lisvane, the villages up to the outskirts of Cardiff. So there is an opportunity to be able to potentially, with older kids anyway, to be able to do stuff, to incorporate a visit to Clinician Lisvane Reservoir with other areas. You could do a little walk with children, etc. The Nant Fawr corridor is owned and managed by Cardiff Council. They largely very sympathetic to doing stuff with children, and there's Friends of Nant Fawr as well, kind of a local residents, etc. group, and I know kind of they just love doing stuff for children as well. And that there's health and safety things you have to consider because you'd be taking children kind of off an enclosed site like Clinician Lisvane Reservoir, but it's a path which it's not on the road. So it's away from the road. So there's that safety there. I think there's an opportunity for doing stuff there. And again, that's mainly woodland and bushes and stuff like that, etc. So you have butterflies, bees, birds, etc. Flying around, and it's an important part of Cardiff, really. The centre of Cardiff is linked to the countryside. Not many cities can say that.
No, I'm probably putting you on the spot here, but our groups have been tasked with coming up with numeracy activities to do at the site. Any potential suggestions, ideas you might have? Obviously, haven't been able to be on site and lucky enough to be on site.
Well, the great thing is it depends again on the age of the children. Obviously, you can go there and do a few visits, and you can compare the counts from one visit to the next. But the wonderful thing is that, as I said, we've got 25 years worth of data from the reservoirs, and for potentially older children, quite a simple way, really, you could compare counts from different years. And you can kind of work out, it's quite easy really, which years, say, cormorants or for geese, etc. And you could probably do quite a simple graph work, which should be able to visualise, different population levels there over different years, and they'll be able to say, they might be able to identify, yes, tufted duck numbers are going down, but cormorant numbers are going up, and that is kind of manipulation of data, manipulation of counts, really, which for probably the slightly older age group would be something that they could do, and I'd happily share that with you.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I mean, that's an expectation, especially for year 5, year 6, is to manipulate data, and that would be brilliant. They're actually manipulating real data, so that would be really interesting. So any groups that are stuck for ideas, that could be a brilliant idea that you do. If our groups wanted to ask any questions, would it be all right to share your website, your email?
Absolutely. And when the time comes, if we can have site visits, I think 6 people can meet up now outside, can't they? From different households. I'd be more than happy to meet people on site, really, just to have an idea and have a little bit of a guided walk.
Right, brilliant. Oh, well, thanks so much for your time. I'm going to stop the recording and before you go. So thanks. If you've got any questions for Dan, I'll put his details on, and I'll also put the BTO website up on the link as well. Thanks, Dan.
Pleasure.
I'll just stop this recording.